Guys, thank you for joining our panel discussion. I'm going to go straight into it. All right, guys, ready?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you define a risk-taking mindset in the context of business, and why is that important for driving growth?
Okay, I think we're all pretty much aligned that, a business that doesn't take risks, this was mentioned earlier, is going to go out of business. I think if you have a leadership team that's overly risk averse, you're likely to stagnate. So there's nothing wrong with taking risk. I think the challenge, as I see it, is around the understanding and application of risk appetite. So it's one thing saying you're risk tolerant when it comes to innovation, but it's a whole other thing in practice. So, for example, do your policies and procedures reflect a risk tolerant mindset for an innovations team? Or is it really risk averse because it's reflecting the views of a compliance professional? One of the examples that we saw is that obviously my team does audit and risk, so we went to visit one of our innovation labs, and what they were talking about is how cumbersome our third-party due diligence processes are when it comes to building third-party relationships, and in innovation it's all about partnering. So do your processes actually encourage third parties to stay away from you and sort of go to other businesses and partner with them? So like I said, so the risk appetite is one thing, understanding it, but applying it is a whole other thing. So that's my take.
I like your risk appetite thoughts. I work for Sovereign Wealth Fund in Abu Dhabi, so our natural DNA has been very risk averse, so I'm not willing to actually take any risk. I think in the last year, this has changed. Generating more alpha, changing trading investment strategies, different products, etc., which actually created a completely different challenge for all of the functions down the line. From if you have, let's say, a high manual process and you actually have a very complex product, are you able and capable to actually process that? Are your systems capable? Are your processes actually designed to actually reflect this level of change? And I think this actually triggered for us 2 points. One is innovation top-down as part of risk appetite, etc. But then also innovation bottom-up, because you actually need to be innovative in terms of how you actually respond to that. So your manual process, where can you actually automate? Where could you actually use AI as an example to actually support that innovation story? And I think this is where transformation is taking place, when you actually venture into the unknown, when you actually challenge the status quo. For me, it's not being about being reckless. It's about being informed, understand the risk you actually take. And I think this is a challenge for us as a risk practitioner. Have a seat at the table, be part of the discussion, in an open-minded discussion. It's not about avoiding risks, it's about informed risk decision-making.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it's about a mindset change as well. When we look at risk appetite, as risk professionals, we're always looking at, it's good to be really inside our appetite. But actually it's not. If you've got a lot of headroom in your appetite, that's wasted opportunity. And so, you need to look at it in that sort of mindset. So it is about changing the risk mindset, I think, to say, have we got sufficient headroom? And therefore, we're still safe to take on more risk and to grow more risk. And then I think, as risk professionals, it's then about setting some guardrails within that, that are then safe to do. So for example, what level of losses would you actually tolerate? And it's about then, in those circumstances, if you're taking more risk, there will naturally be potentially some more loss. So it's then, do you want to change that view and that level?
Peter?
I'll follow what you, Jenny, were saying. I think in terms of risk appetite or risk tolerance, There are areas where in our company are no-goes, I would say, or the risk appetite will always be low. These are in general things which can breach trust related to the company. The second element which is a no-go is the shareholders. We don't want to keep the trust with the shareholders. Shareholders hate surprises and they love predictability. So this is something we want to ensure. For the higher risk tolerance in our company, there are actually 3 types of innovation with a high risk tolerance. One thing we handle it, and I'm coming already to the implementation. We try to do the big innovations in a lab environment, so in a contained environment. Practically, this is typically an independent company with own management, with own structure. This is where we do big innovations. In case it blows up, it doesn't spill over to the core business. The second type of innovation which we don't do, but in theory it can be done. You go for disruption. Disruption means actually doing a big change in your core business, which can bring a big effect, but it can also carry big risks. And the third type is the business as usual innovation, which we also work with. But if I may just add on where to take the risks, if we look at the company, if we talk about people or organizations, we think from experience we can take quite higher risks because typically people and also companies can take up the challenge very often. If we talk about systems, that's a different story. Systems these days are backbone of every business, and we have to be very careful in how we deal the change related to systems. And for shareholders, I think board of directors was mentioned here. This is the right committee to discuss the business objectives on one hand and the risk tolerance, risk appetite on the other hand. And the last thing I want to mention is that board of directors, we are sometimes afraid to go there because we think that they will say no. They very rarely say no. They also want to see the business grow, but they want to understand what is the risk embedded in the business goals we have. So predictability, transparency, discussion with the board about the risk tolerance is a prerequisite for a good decision-making process.
Can I just pick up the point on disruption? What I always find an important ingredient for successful disruption is you actually start small, you actually get the right feedback loops, you actually develop, grow before you actually go big. And an important element for me is accept the possibility of failure. I think there's a fear of failure in general, which is I think part of our human DNA. But if you accept that risk might actually lead to failure, might be not successful, I think you have a different mindset and kind of reframing failure into that's part of the journey.
Yeah. And it's such a different mindset in innovation teams because they're all about learning from your mistakes, developing, etc. And from sort of compliance and risk perspective, you're like, a lot of people can avoid failure at all costs. So you have these really cumbersome risk processes that you're putting onto an innovations team, and you're highly likely to lead to failure because the time taken to innovate is now that much longer. Yeah. And in this day and age, with AI and everything moving so fast, you don't have that luxury of time. So, applying these things is a challenge, I think. Yeah.
It's allowing experimentation as well, which is, I guess, something we're not as comfortable with in risk. But, maybe it's that concept of kind of sandboxing and sort of, trial and fail fast kind of thing. And as you say, learn very quickly from it. So, again, in that case, it's setting some guardrails and saying, okay, go experiment, but within these sort of guardrails or boundaries, and see how it goes.
I think that's
I would like to follow up on the right to fail, if I may.
Sure.
We had this corporate culture or this policy to communicate transparently to people there to experiment. There's no bad project, bad idea. But recently we changed it in a positive framing, actually, so we don't use there's a right to fail, but we say dare to use company resources to come up with innovation. We just reframed it. The topic which you mentioned with the, let's say, The thing is that with every innovation or every project, we try to tackle a certain problem. And in the first maybe months, years, it will be loss-making. But then we hope that at one point of time, there will be the exponential curve. The problem we see in the question is asked, what is the right moment to stop the initiative and when to continue with it? Back in 2014 in our company, someone came up with a project, KBC Mobile, which was a mobile banking application. Try to guess what happened after 2 years. It was not profitable back in time, so people said, let's stop the thing. If you look at the initiative today, it's the biggest distribution channel today. But the problem is that stopping initiative requires courage, because the mindset of the people is, if we stop it, we acknowledge that it was a failure, if I may say so. But it's not the case. It is not a failure. We just try a different alternative scenario to tackle the same problem. But I just wanted to mention that we changed the communication, and now we use, please dare to do things, use the company resources for the benefit of the innovation.
It was very thoroughly answered.
I would also argue, though, that as much as it takes courage to stop something, it also takes courage to start something, you know, and to be innovative, or to be, I guess, more entrepreneurial as well. But if you do that, it is about understanding that risk that you take. So, to your point, it's understanding the foundation on which you're building it. You know, how good, how strong are your controls? Are you going to identify if it gets into difficulties quickly, to be able to then, to your point, take those tough decisions?
And how do you feel that leadership would help enable that culture of risk-taking within your organisations?
I think, you know, you've said it out loud now, culture, right? So I don't think culture was really that prioritized in risk management frameworks historically, and now over time, when we've seen root causes being affiliated to, you know, people's behaviors and beliefs, now it's getting that sort of, you know, that stage. But you know, culture isn't just about leadership, right? It flows throughout the organization. So I'll give you an example. So I was out with one of our innovation labs, and we were talking about, they use drones to do various things. I was talking to the innovation lead, and I was saying, you know, who's the supplier you got this drone from? And when we dug into it, it turned out to be someone on a sanctions watch list. And we said, hey, you know, you probably don't want to do this for XYZ reason. And they were like, well, you know, we're just exploring at the minute. There's no risk materialization, but okay, we'll do it. Now, what the guy said to me is, and this is quite a senior guy, he goes, but what if I know Costco sells this drone. He was like, in the Americas. What if I buy it from Costco? So my due diligence is now on Costco, and they'll pass. And I thought, well, this is the whole risk culture point, right? So you can arm tools, techniques, and toolkits and all of that, but if you don't have that common set of risk behaviors and beliefs, yeah, you're going to trip up. So.
Yeah, but it's about working in partnership, and so you're having those conversations, and they're being quite open with you about their thoughts. You know, if it's first line versus second line, and for me, that's a demonstration of a healthy risk culture. That, you know, they feel okay to have those conversations with you. They're pulling you in, and they're having that, you know, debate with the second line. And I think that's really, you know, where you'll get stronger in that risk taking, is if the first and second line work together much more in partnership, and the second line, you know, the risk function is brought in much earlier in those conversations when they're thinking about the strategy and where they're going to go and how they're going to innovate.
I think that collaboration is a key part. I think the audit session earlier spoke also about like starting with policing. I think risk often is seen as a policing function that leads to the fact that you're brought in late in the game. If you really want to create value add with risk management, you need to have your seat at the table. You need to actually create a value add for everyone actually being involved, and hence it's more partnership. That actually means open communication, no trust breaker. That also means the right level of resources, training, infrastructure, etc., to actually enable that. I think Michael Rasmussen yesterday spoke about kind of maturity level. I think the room was 2.5 to 3. I think a lot of that is due to the right level of culture. I think as a practitioner, we have invested heavily into methodology, toolkits. We have all done hundreds of RCSAs. But the culture part, that's the most difficult one also to achieve. I don't know, Peter, how is it for you guys?
I fully agree with that. We try to deploy a few practices in our company to stimulate the leadership, let's say, in supporting the innovation. First is to set the tone from the top. Our CEO is head of innovation, so he's driving the change agenda. And actually, the philosophy we have is, if there is an opportunity, we take the opportunity, actually, and we innovate. The second thing is, it is important to give the clarity on the purpose of the company and align people around that purpose, because then people start thinking broad, actually, and they come up with big ideas. If the purpose would be, let's say we want to make money, then people will come up with initiatives like we increase the margin, for example. Then the next one is sometimes when the boundaries are set too narrow, for example, regulatory, etc., it pushes people to innovate as well. So that's next one. And the last one, there is quite often there is let's say biologically driven conception which says people don't like change. We don't think so. Try to put a person in a dark room for a few days, and these people will get probably depressed. So people actually, in our view, like change if it's properly communicated, properly explained. That actually can give a sense of purpose, and it can give a sense of motivation and excitement about the change. So I think these are the drivers, the practices we try to use in our company.
I think I would just add one thing. In terms of sort of leadership skill sets or behaviors that I've seen make a real change, one of them, for me, is about convening. And it's all about bringing the right people in the right rooms and having that discussion together. So if it's all widely acknowledged that risks are interconnected. But are the discussions that are happening in an organization interconnected? Are those connected? Are teams connected? Are they limited by your operating model, et cetera, et cetera? So if all you're doing is running through a risk register column by column, you need a screen this big to fit all of those columns on a page, right? So it's cumbersome. So it's about that debate. It's not about the perfect spreadsheet or tool or whatever. It's about that debate. And as a leader, if you're able to convene, I think that will go a long way at every level.
I also find, like, when you have that debate, the leader needs to manage ambiguity, uncertainty. Change is always something which actually has also maybe an emotional element to the employees involved. So a level of empathy, actually going through kind of that process, which means even failure, which means setbacks, drawbacks. I think it's an important element. So how can you, as part of your communication, kind of to my earlier point on reframing maybe failures into that's part of the journey, that kind of level of resilience in a slightly different way, I think is an important element.
You hear that phrase a lot, don't waste a crisis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe taking this to a lower level, I would say the failures of a project don't go as envisaged. What we see in our company, and if you look at the world's biggest innovations of the last decades, many of them were driven by frustration of the people in a company. Things which didn't work well in a process or in a company. Few people just jumped on it, improved it, they put it in the market, and then you saw the multiplication factor. You will see some software applications, you will see hardware applications like that. So the frustration is actually innovation engine. We should present it that way, and this is one of the stimulus to innovate, actually.
Because everyone can have a bright idea, right?
Yeah.
I think, if I think about the number of conversations I've had with friends and peers about starting a business, and then someone else starts the business, and they're like, "Oh, I had that idea." But the beliefs and behaviors that make that strategy or innovation strategy sustainable is something else, and that's where this risk culture comes in. I think I'm just remembering a conversation our CFO at BSI had about. She used to work for Thomas Cook. You're probably more familiar with them in the UK. So they were, I think, widely known as the first sort of package tour operator, and it sort of started with some rail trip from Leicester to Loughborough. And even though that was quite innovative and all of that, what they never managed to land was the sort of online presence. And she actually went on to join Expedia, so she saw the other side of doing it well, and they had interactions with the old C-suite. But there's various things that went wrong, but one of it was to do about the clunkiness of the procedures and those policies and processes that just lengthened that time to innovate and made it a lot harder. So, I think we're speaking to the same challenges.
I just wanted to pick up one point where I think we haven't spoken about it. Innovation also requires different skill set for risk practitioner. So I've been in that space for 20 years, and I think the level of change in the last 2-3 years has been by far outperforming the years before. Looking into, as an example, for our organization, all of our risk guys actually also go through Lean Six Sigma up to black belt certification, kind of different mindset that you can actually apply a similar skill set. Instead of doing, as an example, your risk assessment, risk review, we actually tried to combine a lean and a risk review in one. We just add a different perspective. It's a structured way how to actually approach a problem set to actually get a different outcome. And I think kind of investing into training, development, education, new perspectives, it's important on this journey.
I absolutely agree, and I think it's one of the biggest challenges for the risk function at the moment is how you remain relevant and how you remain current as well in that such a fast-paced environment. And I'm just thinking, and we were talking earlier about things like generative AI, and as risk professionals, the business is looking to us now to articulate what are those risks. There's great opportunities with generative AI, but it also comes with significant risk. Yeah. So they're looking to us to be very clear and articulate those risks and then work with them to manage them. And it's really, really challenging, I think, for risk professionals at the moment to keep that up to date, and you're almost having to stay one step ahead to be able to understand and articulate those risks. No easy answers on that one at the moment, I have to say, but it is a big challenge for us. Yeah.
Okay, to follow up on that, there are a few things we try to put in place to tackle the skills problem and the new risks problem of generative AI, etc. We really focus on the diversity of our teams, because we have 20 nationalities working in our company. We know that there is a difference in how the world is seen by 20 years old people, and then someone who went through all the scars and bruises, I would say, from the previous projects have done that. So the diversity helps to be agile and to tackle the new risks. But there are also other things. We break silos, actually. We have a flat organizational structure. There's a nice book about it. That Silos Killed Sony, actually. You can Google it. There's an interesting book on the topic. So we try to get rid of the silos, and when there is a problem to solve, new risk type, etc., we just put multidisciplinary teams. We put different people around the problem, so they all bring their own point of view into the discussion.
That diversity is really, really key. We've implemented what we call a shadow RMM. So we have our RMM with our executives, but we also run a day or two ahead of that RMM, a shadow RMM, where we've got our talent of the future and quite a diverse population. They have the same materials and papers. They discuss and debate and come to decisions and conclusions. And what they then do is bring that into our RMM so that you do get that different perspective into that risk decision, and it's working really, really well, and they're bringing in some really good, different, diverse viewpoints as well, particularly on some of the innovation.
Just to add on the AI piece, I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about as much is we talk about mapping risks to objectives, but so often these organizations have 3-year, 5-year strategic objectives. And AI changes the game. So your strategy can't be set in stone for 3 years, 5 years. How often do you test it? So in the same way, does it get stress tested? So many organizations, they just stick to the same strategies for 3 years on end, and that's going to make a lot of difference now.
Yeah.
I think, so.
I had 2 more questions, but is our time up?
Yeah.
Yeah? Guys, you were great panelists. I didn't even have to do anything.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.